folks. We're back here on MyHockey Live. Jake Levin alongside Jim Clark of the Boston Herald. You can follow him at In the Slot. That is at @in_the_slot. And we are going to forgive his UMass hat today. But, all right, Jim, let's talk about a different kind of bracket. You know college basketball is on my mind, of course. But let's talk about the Super 8 here. And it's getting down to the nitty-gritty time. Only about 2 weeks left of the regular season. Less than that, really. Who do you think is the number one overall seed in the Super 8 if it were to be seeded today?
I mean, even though Central Catholic lost to Waltham the other night, I think you got to still leave them at number one just based on their body of work and the teams they've beaten. You know, they've beaten all the teams behind them. They've beaten BC High, they've beaten Pope Francis, they've beaten St. John's Prep. You know, other than one hiccup or a road game, a tough league game, and a tough rink against Waltham, you know, every team's going to have something like that over the course of the season. I point out all the time, it's been 20 years since a team has been able to run the table in boys high school hockey. So it's, you know, you can't begrudge a team for a hiccup like that at any point in the season. So yeah, I gotta lean Central Catholic at this point, definitely.
So speaking of Central Catholic and the team that beat them, Waltham, is that enough of a signature win to get the train rolling on them, at the very least getting into a play-in game? I know they have 3 losses, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that too many out of the DCL MVC? And if it is, does that Central Catholic win trump the rest?
We'll see. I mean, I think it's enough to keep them in the conversation at the very least. You know, had they lost that game, I think it would have been easy for the coaches maybe to remove them from the board. Because I don't think, you know, trying to remember the schedule off the top of my head, I don't think they really have any marquee matchups remaining on their schedule. So, you know, that being the biggest win on their schedule, you know, it'll definitely keep them in the conversation. You know, they had a tough loss to North Andover, who's a pretty good Division II team, but that's the kind of a game that people look at. So, you know, those things might balance themselves out a little bit. You know, quite frankly, I'm looking at it right now, and you know, I'm struggling a little bit to try to find, you know, who's going to be in those 8, 9, 10 spots. I think you just got a lot of teams that have, you know, various warts here and there, teams that have beaten each other, you know, teams that have beaten this team, lost to this team, which lost to this team, you know, that whole slippery rock argument that you got going on. You know, but that happens every year. I think that you start to get to this point in the season and you kind of have to not ignore like 1 or 2 results, but you kind of have to take the whole body of work and see what a team has done over the entire course of the season. Not to put too much stock on one particular game, whether it was a win or a loss, and, you know, just go from there.
2 teams playing today, Hingham and Arlington. I'll ask you one more question before I hand off to Mike Flanagan here. Is this a win and in game for either of these teams, or can they still pick up more victories with the rest of their schedule? I know Hingham has BC High on Saturday in the first round of the Buddy Ferreira, and I'm just envisioning Hingham, if they were to go on and win today and beat BC High, I would think that punches their ticket. But what if they somehow lose today and lose to BC High?
I don't think Hingham's really got anything to worry about. You know, they've got enough really good wins. You know, beating St. John's last night like they did. You know, and some of the great wins they've had over the course of their schedule. And they played a really tough schedule. You know, you look at the 3 losses they have. You know, they lost to the Prep, they lost to Central Catholic, and
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's, right. And, you know, St. Mary's is an interesting team because they're a team that's kind of had a couple of bumps along the road, but they have 2 or 3 really good wins on their ledger now. So, yeah, I don't think Hingham necessarily has anything to worry about. I think Arlington, this is probably a bigger game for Arlington than it is for Hingham at this point. You know, Arlington's got a good win against Austin Prep that they can kind of hang their hat on. You know, but they lost to Burlington. They had the loss early in the season to BC High. So I think this is one that Arlington would really like to be able to grab going into the next couple of weeks.
All right, I'm going to let Mike ask you a question here.
Sure.
Jim, nice to finally meet you.
All right, Mike.
Big fan.
No problem. Thank you.
Just wanted to hear your quick thoughts on maybe some non-Super 8 teams that started off season a little strong, like Severian, Reading, Malden Catholic, and then they plagued by injuries and they faded towards the end of the season. What are your thoughts on them as far as getting into the Division I state tournament and making some noise?
Well, it's going to be real interesting to see. I'll start with Malden Catholic because obviously they're on the brink. They're basically in playoff mode right now where at best they can afford 1 tie the rest of the season. And, you know, they've got a makeup game against Fairfield Prep, which they haven't rescheduled yet. Then they have to go out to Springfield next week, and they start with St. Mary's, I believe, and then they would have to play either Pope Francis or Central Catholic. So they can't lose another game or else they're out of the tournament completely. It's very similar to what happened with BC High probably 8 or 9 years ago, and then with Catholic Memorial, 3 or 4 years ago. You know, those teams play brutal schedules. Let's face it. I mean, they face the iron of the iron. But at some point you have to win some of those games too. So MC's sitting there at 5-8-3 right now. They play Braintree tomorrow night. That's not going to be an easy game because Braintree, they're kind of fighting a little bit just to stay above the 500 mark. So, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens with MC. The Zavarian's very, very similar. Same with CM. All three of those Catholic Conference teams below BCI and St. John's Prep are kind of sitting right around the 500 bubble right now. So they really need to take care of business just to make sure that they get into the, clinch a spot in the tournament before they can even worry about whether they're going to be in the Super 8 conversation. And I think Reading is probably very similar. Reading's going to have to go down to Falmouth and play in the Buddy Ferreira tournament next week. They get, I don't want to say they get the easier side of the draw, but they're on the side with AC and Archbishop Williams and Falmouth as opposed to being on the BCI, Austin, Prep, Hingham side. So it's funny how that works out every year. But, I'm sure Reading would like to put together, 3 or 4 decent wins going down the stretch and, kind of get some momentum going into the playoffs as well. But, that's why this time of year is fun. There's so many different storylines. It's not just seeing which teams are, trying to solidify their Super 8 seeds, which teams are trying to, potentially put themselves in the conversation for the wild card games, and then, which teams are still trying to play themselves into the tournament at all. There's a lot of different things to watch.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. He is Jim Clark, Boston Herald. You can follow him at In The Slot. That is at in_the_slot. He is the Joe Lenardi of high school hockey, and even better, I would say. So, all right, we will be back really in a couple seconds here for Hingham Arlington second period. Jim, thanks so much for coming on,
Jake.
as always.
Anytime. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Take care.